What's up, YouTube? It's like 3 a.m. in the post Thanksgiving lull. Tried to sleep, failed, so here we are recording YouTube videos instead. I posted a 4-color shadow video last week, I believe, and talked about a couple of changes I wanted to make, like swapping out some Fluster Storms for Stern Scoldings and dropping the Questing Druids in the main for, I think it was like an additional Lightning Bolt and a 20th land, which ended up being the Nurturing Peat land. So here we are. Let's showcase the changes and see if they're worthwhile, if they're terrible, if I have no mind in deck building, or if 4 colors cracked. On to match number 1. Really, it's just like any deck that adds a 4th color to fix a problem could be considered a better version if it doesn't stumble because of that 4th color. So for this, we're basically like the Jund Shadow base, splashing blue for counter spells because, hey, Stubborn and Owl is pretty good when you got a bunch of 4+ power guys to enable Ferocious, and helps to deal with a lot of things like the One Ring and Up the Beanstalk that can come off the top of the library and make things difficult for you. So, round number 1 here, looks like we're up against Hardened Scales. We'll Goyf into Fable. Kind of a rough start because we want these Unholy Heats, but we also want a Clock. And contrary to popular belief, it's kind of difficult to have both of them. I could have attacked in, but I kind of wanted to just get the damage in, get the Goyf bigger. And I didn't want him to block the Shaman token that way. That guy over there. I want this little extra mana. So opponent's got a Fable picking up a Shadow Spear, or Urza Saga picking up a Shadow Spear. Play a big Ballista. Gotta kill it before they're putting counters on it, but they do get to kill my token. I don't want them killing my token. Ugh. I also hate using that mana because I would have rather gotten Kroxa down this turn. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works out. Wouldn't have stopped any of this, but still Kroxa. Opponent gets to go all in on a huge life-linking flying token. Can't do anything about that. So we're on to game number 2. Sideboarding against Hardened Scales. Things like Ragavan are coming out, trimming on some Thought Seizes because we get to a top deck war pretty quickly. I usually trim on a couple Bowmasters. They're like good against a turn 1 Zabaz and pretty terrible against everything else. Boarding in Back to Nature for things like Hardened Scales, Urza Saga, Terra Sunder for any artifacts and enchantments. And then this is like the best feeling in the world. A Back to Nature 2-for-1. Get to take out a Hardened Scales and an Urza Saga. Honestly, this might be the first Back to Nature that I've gotten to cast in the last like 6 years. So welcome back to Nature. Get to ping off a little automaton here. Hopefully get down a threat next turn. Or not, you know. But opponent's missing their land drop, so that's pretty huge for us. That gives us time to set up a little bit. Maybe get this Giganta down. We could play out Shadow, but with only our shock land, Giganta would still be more power next turn. And I get the added benefit of like going ahead and making my big mana play now and investing in smaller amount in the Shadow later. But opponent finds nothing to do, so we're on to game number 3. Land heavy hand, but I'm hoping with like the scries I can get out of it as we draw the 5th land, see the 6th land on top, shuffle that away, draw Thoughtseize Lightning Bolt. So we've got live stuff. Not the best live stuff, but it's live stuff. Welding Jar and a Zabaz. We'll go ahead and fire off the Lightning Bolt to use up the Welding Jar. Bowmaster, not the greatest top deck in the world. We could go for a Thoughtseize here. I decided to hold up the Back to Nature just to go ahead and take the Hardened scales out in case they had like two XX plays. Like if they had a Ballista and a Hangerback like that, then I get to deal with both of them a little bit more efficiently. Unfortunately, they do have this red mana to sack Zabaz, get their Ballista online, and me with my 3 lands not looking particularly good. Sorry, I meant to say me with my 4 lands not looking particularly good. So, yeah. Not really much you can say about this. Like, we start with a 4-lander, and I think we ended up drawing like 4 more. Or 3 more in 5 draws. That's just kind of how it goes. On to match number 2. We are on the draw. Reasonable hand. We've got turn 1 stub on the draw for not a whole lot, but something. We've got Bobble to kind of filter. We've got Tarmogoyf, which if our opponent's throwing around Bobbles and Preordains, we got a pretty sizable Tarmogoyf, so that's a plus. Fetch and Shock in case I find a Bolt here, but I still get to hold up Stub. Steam Vents into Urza Saga, Preordained Bobble. Makes me think like an Underworld Breach grinding station deck. So that's kind of what I'm going for, hoping that they decide to lean into Saga here instead of go for like a Teferi. To Thoughtseize, and yep, right on the money. Get the 1 ring, get to hit in with Goyf. Now my opponent's going to make a token here. I want to wait for them to commit the mana to making another token before I go for Bowmaster. Because if they don't, then I might like sit back on Stub instead and not play out the Bowmaster. But as soon as they commit the mana for the second token, then I get my ping off. Dash in with Rag, hold up Stub for this Underworld Breach, and feels good. Like I said, one of the big things that the Blue Splash helps is the ability to stop some of these problematic things off the top, like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, the 1 ring, Underworld Breach in this case, up the Beanstalk. Things that traditional Jund Shadow can't answer very effectively. So we're on the draw. We've got a turn 1 Thoughtseize. Sideboarding against these 1 ring, like Underworld Breach decks. Usually if it says Counterspell, it's coming in. I decided not to bring in the Stern Scoldings this time because I felt like I had a good enough matchup that I didn't need to adjust a lot. I did bring in my Grave Hate because it can just stop combo. And I ended up boarding out like a couple Ragavans on the draw. Sometimes these decks have Renin 6. Usually not, but I've seen it. But either way, Ragavan's pretty awkward on the draw against like Imries and Ledger Shredders potentially. Either way, we've got EE to stop the grinding station. Kind of like last game, if they go for another construct, then I want to go ahead and pop the engineered explosives before they can go get a pithing needle. If they didn't go for the construct, then I would just sit back on like Unholy Heat and Lightning Bolt. That last attack, important to note that if my opponent double blocked, I could bolt myself and that bolt turns on Unholy Heat, turns on Delirium. So I would be able to like bolt myself, Unholy Heat one of the constructs to grow the shadow to Ferocious and take out both of the constructs. If they do something on their turn to grow these constructs, then I have the ability to bolt them And then Unholy Heat, like if they grow the constructs, attack with both, can bolt them, Unholy Heat. If my opponent plays something I need to interact with, I can bolt myself, and then Stubborn Denial, have Unholy Heat for a construct. So having all of these options, it's important to know, like, not only is one of these turning on Delirium for me, is one of them getting my Shadow Ferocious. What kind of a board state do I need to be in for these cards to have certain effects? Opponent decides to swing in with both of the constructs. So now I'm in a position where, all right, if they make a construct, maybe I can Lightning Bolt them, find a fetch land, and I've got lethal with like Stub backup. So that's what we're going for here. Don't find the fetch, but we do just find a second Shadow, which is pretty reasonable as well. We could Unholy Heat the token to force through the damage, but I kind of like playing out the Shadow, just like letting the chump happen, play out the Shadow, because I think this incentivizes my opponent to make a worse line if they don't think I have any sort of interaction. So Stub off there. We can Unholy Heat something end of turn if we want to. Not really a huge reason to. And now with the fetch land, we force the double chump here. All right. So my opponent blocks with the Haywire Might. I don't think they have anything for just a green and blue that can stop them from dying. My assumption here is that they believed that the Haywire Might dying would immediately gain them life, and it wouldn't be like a trigger that goes on the stack after damage is dealt, and they would die before they actually gain the 2 life. Or they just didn't think I had another shock land to get. One way or the other. Match number 3, opening 7, 1 land, didn't work out. Mole to 6. We do have our mana taken care of pretty well. We aren't running a breeding pool in this deck, so we don't have a pair up with Blood Crypt to get all 4 colors. But because we have the 3rd land, we can get like Blood Crypt, Watery or Overgrown Tomb, or Stomping Ground, depending on if we need more red or black, into Watery Grave and have everything online. Opponent revealing Flame of Anor, some sort of blue-red control deck, probably Snapcaster, maybe Mutavault, who knows. Bowmaster, pretty good into the 1-for-1 removal. And then Thoughtseize, an excellent top deck to get this second Lightning Bolt out of hand so we can get Shadow down. We see Days Undoing and a counter spell. Take the counter spell, get the Shadow down. They go for Bolt on the Shadow, which we have Fetch and Shock to grow the Shadow out of range. And then they decide to fire off the Days Undoing, which I think really favors us, because as you can see from this Thoughtseize here, they've got a lot of 3-mana plays between like Narset, Flame of Anor, Archmage's Charm, Subtlety, and we're just jam-packed full of efficient things to do. Let the Narset resolve, because the Narset doesn't matter. Like, they need something a lot better than the Narset to stop us here. They can't spell Snare, the Stubborn Denial. Sideboarding, trim on some of the spot removal. Brought in, what did I bring in? Veil of Summer and Autumnal Gloom. That gentleman. That wonderful, wonderful beats mono black gentleman. The opponent's just going to fire off some preordains. That's fine with us. I could play the Tarmogoyf here, but we saw Spell Snare in the main game 1. So I don't really want to run this Tarmogoyf into a Spell Snare here. But I'm completely fine running the Bowmasters into a potential counter, because if they do have something for the Bowmaster, I can untap, play the Goyf, have Stub, have Veil of Summer or something like that. So we're going to go for the Goyf with Stub back up. We could have gotten a Stomping Ground and played Goyf with Veil back up, but I kind of like the idea of Stub a little bit more, just in case the Goyf resolves. Stub is a better option into like Days Undoing, Narset, whatever the case may be. Little bit of a fun series here. So I've got this 0-1 Goyf when the turn starts. I don't think the Unholy Heats are going to do a ton into their open board because they don't have a Narset I need to interact with. They don't have a Snapcaster. I do have extra red mana. So we're just going to fire off like the Bobble on ourselves to kind of filter. We're going to Unholy Heat our own Goyf just to grow it and get a little extra damage in. And now we have Bolt ourselves. This is probably my favorite line of this entire league. So if you want to learn anything, pay attention to this one. So we have like Bolt ourselves if we need to grow our shadow outside of Bolt range, something like that. Opponent plays an Engineered Explosives on 1. Pretty good. Deals with our shadow, cuts out our clock a really solid amount, and then goes for an Unholy Heat on our Tarmogoyf. So there's already an instant in the yard. So if they go for like Unholy Heat plus Bolt, kills the Goyf. Can't do anything about it. But instead of Unholy Heat plus Bolt, they go Unholy Heat plus second Unholy Heat. Now I'm pausing here because I want y'all to think about it. If there's a line you see that looks pretty interesting, pretty intriguing, and kind of out of the ordinary, so I can't bolt them or heat to grow my Goyf. What I can do is Bowmaster, and Bowmaster pinging itself adds creature to the yard, which actually ends up growing the Goyf outside of Unholy Heat range. Plus, it plays around Counterspell or Spell Snare on the Bowmaster, because if they counter it, goes to the yard, grows the Goyf. So we're going to go for a Bowmaster. An opponent makes the egregious mistake of counterspelling our Bowmaster, which not only allows us to get a creature in the yard and keep our Goyf alive, also taps them off of Engineered Explosives. So when we top deck a Fable that thankfully doesn't matter, we have the ability to Thoughtseize them, bolt them, tack in for lethal. Feels good. Feels good. But even if we had to like Bowmaster ping itself to grow the Goyf, we still would have had Goyf plus a 1/1 token if they hadn't have counterspelled. So feels good. Bobble. So this is round number 4, I think. Bobble them, see a Wall of Roots. Pretty slow hand against Yawgmoth, but not the end of the world. Strangleroot Geist. I love seeing Strangleroot Geist so much more than a Wall of Roots here, because I don't mind just like taking an extra hit off Wall or off Strangleroot Geist, as long as I can stop something kind of significant from happening. So Thoughtseize trying to tag like a Grist or a Yawgmoth, but we'll take a Bowmaster, leave him with a redundant copy of Soul Cauldron. We've got Shadow. We can kill off this Strangleroot Geist before the Soul Cauldron resolves. Not that it really matters, but either way, it's gone. Opponent plays out a Dryad Arbor. Could go for the Unholy Heat. I kind of wanted to wait until my turn so that if I went for Heat, I could Stubborn Denial a Cord for 1. But we're just going to trade off Bowmasters and blah, 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 blah. Soul Cauldron really has made the matchup really awkward And it's not even because it's like extraordinarily good on their creatures. It's more awkward because it's extraordinarily good against us for shutting off our graveyard. So things like Kroxa, Unholy Heat get a lot worse with the existence of Soul Cauldron. So like you see here, I don't want my opponent to exile my Kroxa. So we've got to play out Gigantha in the hopes that next turn we might be able to play Kroxa, sack it, and then immediately get it back without giving our opponent a priority opportunity, which is what you see here. So if you stack your triggers correctly, making sure to make them discard first and then sacrificing the Kroxa, then your opponent doesn't actually get a priority opportunity anywhere to exile the Kroxa, because as soon as you recast it or escape it from the yard, it goes onto the stack. It leaves the graveyard. Your opponent can't interact with it anymore, and you can make sure that you get it back onto the battlefield. So just make sure that you're careful about stacking your triggers. If you sack it or stack the triggers to sack the Kroxa first, then your opponent can exile it before the discard trigger resolves, and you don't have the ability to escape it. So good little practice there. Sideboarding against Yawgmoth. The big thing here is just like get the Ragavans out. I end up trimming on a couple stubs. If your opponent's really big on cards like Elven Chorus and One Ring and the Soul Cauldrons, then maybe you want to keep more stubs in, Core Calling. But usually my game plan kind of involves going as fast as I can and dealing with all the creatures or the problematic creatures and go from there. Stern Scolding, also one of the cards that I'm testing out, that this is one of, if not the matchup that I want those more than just about any other matchup in Modern. Because Stern Scolding does counter Grist, it counters Yawgmoth, counters every creature except Endurance. I say every creature except Endurance. If you're like me and you play in a local meta that used to be kind of Yawg crazy, then occasionally you'd have to play against Yawg that techs for you with Chameleon Colossus and Thrun, and Stern Scolding does not answer those things. So be careful before you assume Stern Scolding is going to answer everything. But yeah, we force our opponent to sack off their Wall of Roots to get rid of our Shadow early on, and got to keep her on the Goyf. That was the hope. I didn't think it would actually work out, that they would sack and kind of brick off. But obviously I'm not going to complain that that's the case. Feels pretty good when the plan actually comes together. And now we get to just curve into Goyf beats. I wasn't planning on the terminate, but then I kind of thought, well, I don't want them courting for 3, so I probably should terminate. And did, and Goyf finish off the job. And really not much to say about that one. Like, every time I play against Yawgmoth, I feel like the matchup is one extreme or the other. It's either my opponent curved out Delighted Halfling into Grist into Dude into Yawgmoth, and I never had a chance. Or my opponent curved out Delighted Halfling and I killed it into Wall of Roots, and I thought seized and played a Shadow into I don't know, Bowmaster, and it didn't matter because I just had a bunch of big bodies on board. So if there is some cards that have been working for you really well against Yawgmoth, besides like Stern Scolding, please let me know, because that's a matchup I'm really keyed in on at the moment. Seeing it a lot in challenges, seeing it doing really well in challenges and preliminaries. And I think it's one of the ones I want to target a little bit more if I can afford to. I have thought about like Curse Totem, obviously on the radar, but might be a little narrow. Who knows? Either way, round 5 looks like we're up against Hammertime. We do have a Bowmaster for this turn 2 Esper Sentinel. Watery Grave and Stomping Ground gives us all 4 of our colors. And then Unholy Heat's a great pickup for like a following Stoneforge Mystic. So as soon as they go get a hammer, we know we need to consider killing the Stoneforge right away. Obviously, they could have a Sigarda's Aid in hand as such. But we do have double pieces of interaction for the Yawgmoth now. I do want to think about that last turn. So I considered bolting myself. That would put 3 more damage on them, put them down to 12. And the thought there was I enable Ferocious on the Shadow, and I've got Bowmaster ping to potentially take out the Yawgmoth Nexus if they like fire it up, attack in, and don't have a protection spell. But I could still, like I said, stub the Colossus Hammer. This is kind of the part of this game that I don't think I played very well. My opponent's got Pure Steel. I know that they have a Colossus Hammer in hand. So I think that I should have gone for Bolt on the Pure Steel here. And if they respond with Hammer, I Stubborn Denial it. If they don't, then I go to my turn. Instead, I went Bowmaster, ping myself to grow the Shadow. Found another Bowmaster, attacked in. And this is where I think I got in trouble because I got greedy and saw damage on the Pure Steel. I need to ping that off. I get to stub the hammer. But now I'm just dead to a second hammer that they ended up having. And I feel like I could have played around that a lot better and didn't. Like, even if it was a case of letting them play out the hammer with the Pure Steel on board and attaching it to the Pure Steel, that still would have been better because I could have flashed in Bowmaster, chumped, and then had like another attack back on my turn. Either way, sideboarding against Hammertime, trim some Ragavans, trim some like Fables and Thought Seizes because they're all kind of slow, bad top decks. Bring in Back to Nature, Terra Sunders, Engineered Explosives, Alpine Moon, because the Alpine Moon takes out Urza Saga. Another one of these nice color pairings in the deck. So you got Watery Grave with Stomping Ground. You've got Overgrown Tomb with Steam Vents. If you wanted to run the Breeding Pool, you could, but I don't like having the Breeding Pool with A, Kroxa, because Breeding Pool does not help cast Kroxa, and B, Terminate, as you can see in hand. Breeding Pool and Terminate would not go well together. So, last turn we got to attack into the... let's rewind, actually. Because I think this is fairly important. Here. So we attack into the 2/4/4 or 2/2/2 Sanctifiers with the 3/4 Tarmogoyf because I'm hoping that my opponent will like go for the double block and I can blow them out with Back to Nature, adding an instant to the yard and enchantment with their Urza Saga. Since they don't go for the block, I decide to fire off the Back to Nature anyway get the Saga off the board so they can't find like a hammer. And it presents a pretty quick clock with Goyf. So that's always nice. They want to chump in with the Sanctifier, that's okay. Saga finds a whole bunch of removal, which obviously okay as well. Get to keep attacking with the Goyf. Just hope they don't have a hammer this turn because we can't beat a hammer. So I'm not throwing blockers in the way if I can't beat the card anyway. It goes for an Yawgmoth block, which we get a Terminate on. They go down to 2. We have the Lightning Bolt to wrap things up. But yeah, what I mean by not playing around the hammer is if my opponent had the hammer on the Sanctifier there and gained the 13, I couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't deal with the Sanctifier, so there's no point in like considering a chump, which I don't even think I could chump there. But no point in thinking about it. Game 3 on the draw, pretty good hand. Curving out interaction, especially against something like Giver Runes, is extremely nice. Decided to hold up the Stern Scolding. I think I was holding up the Stern Scolding only for Sanctifier on Vec. Anything else, and I wanted to hit this, use a red removal spell on the Giver Runes. Got the double black for Shadow in case I wanted to like bolt myself, play a Shadow. Thankfully ended up finding a third land for the Steam Vents. I probably could have played or gotten the Steam Vents earlier instead of the Blood Crypt. Again, I was kind of keyed in on being able to double Shadow. I think I was putting that pretty highly on my list. Maybe I should have put more emphasis on having access to Stern Scolding, but I kind of figured if they weren't going for a turn 2 Sanctifier, then the amount of things I cared about Stern Scolding kind of went down drastically, especially after they played the Saga on turn 2, and I figured it would come down to like dealing with Saga tokens. Attacking with 1 Shadow here, because if I do get blocked, I can bolt myself. And I want to keep the second Shadow back so that I have the ability to block one of these constructs, let the other through, keep my Shadow alive. Also love bolting off the Yawgmoth and then immediately drawing the Alpine Moon and feeling punished. But we are seeing these Stern Scoldings put in a lot of work. I mentioned at the end of the last 4-color video that I wanted to try out the Stern Scoldings in the sideboard pretty bad. And I think they have really paid off this league. So at least at the moment, I feel they're kind of here to stay. Thought about attacking him with Shadow and bolting myself, but I kind of wanted to save the interaction, see what happened on their turn, and if they did nothing like this, then I would go for bolt myself, get Shadow to where I could potentially force double chump block. Which opponent's just going to block one of them. This was a mistake. I should have cast the Unholy Heat first to play around Spell Pierce. But instead I played the Tarmogoyf first and got pierced. Then March of Otherworldly Light on my Shadow. Thankfully we top deck an artifact. I was shocked that there wasn't an artifact in the yard yet. So this actually forces the chump block on one of the Goyfs. And now if we find one more piece of interaction, like the Terrace Under, we have lethal Goyfs attacking through. Weird ending there. Weird ending. Like, yeah, Spell Pierce. I wasn't expecting that many. but glad we were able to play around it. Let's talk about changes. So I mentioned from the last video to this video, I dropped the 2 questing druids in the main for a 3rd lightning bolt and a 20th land with the peat land. I thought the 20th land was really good, except for that one game that we flooded out really. I actually think we had 2 games that we flooded out really badly. So if you were wanting to cut the 20th land for like, I don't know, some draw spell, you could. I would even consider cutting the 20th land for like a copy or 2 of Night's Whisper. Something like that could be pretty useful. There were a few times that we didn't get shadowed online as quickly as I would have liked. I know people are going to ask about Dragon's Rage Channeler. I hate Dragon's Rage Channeler with a passion. I definitely don't want another thing that dies to Bowmaster. Ragavan just has the upside of like snowballing so extraordinarily well that it's worth it. Don't want more of those things. Croaks was fine. Bowmaster was fine. Stub was pretty good. Stern Scolding A+. Alpine Moon was good. Terra Sunder was good. Back to Nature. I don't know. Back to Nature's like, when it's high upside, when you back to nature and hit your opponents like Sigarda's Aid and Urza's Saga, or Urza's Saga and Hardened Scales, double up the Beanstalk, it feels great. But if you're just 1-for-1 trading back to nature for like a Saga, it feels kind of bad. Terra Sunder, I think, is the exception, because Terra Sunder's like, okay, I trade this for an Urza's Saga, and then a couple of matches later, I trade it for a Fury that got evoked, or I trade it for a Murktide Regent, and all those look great. But back to nature only being enchantments is a non-zero consideration. EE, good. I don't think we actually veiled anything, but with all the scam running around the red-black stuff, I do think Veil Summer is probably a necessary evil. But yeah, I've been, again, enjoying the list. As always, if you can take like a 4-color or 3-color deck and add in a 4th color and not like get punished by your mana, then it feels like a pretty good decision. So, not saying this one is right, but at least at the moment, it's not doing embarrassingly bad. And I think that's about all I can ask for at the moment, until I figure out where I want to go in the current meta. It could very well be that the correct choice is to just go with like the Jun main deck, because I think it gives me the best fight against Scam, and then board into like the 4 Stubs or some number of Stern Scolding. The downside of that is I do think that the main deck Stubborn Denials give you like a lot of game against unfair matchups where Jun typically struggles. And I think the bump in win percentage you get against those unfair matchups is worth the slight drop in win percentage against things like Scam. So that's my 2 cents. As always, I will have a link down in the description of the video to the Twitch if you want to come check out 4-Color Shadow and some other variants live on stream. I have a link to the Twitter if you want to know when a stream is going live. Twitter is the first place it gets updated. And a link to the Discord as well as the deck list. So if you want to come talk about the deck, talk about your experiences, what's working for you, what's not, then feel free to come hang out, say hey, see what's up. Other than that, hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. I will catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.